Hi everyone, welcome to the Tanhu Labs channel. In this tutorial, we will create a service account application using Spring Framework. In our previous service content project, we used this kind of layered structure. Persistence layer was the topmost layer and application layer was the lowest layer. But today, we changed this structure to do this. Application layer will be topmost layer and persistence layer will be lowest layer. Why we need to do this? We will do this because understanding of some kind of layered architecture concepts. Our account servers will have a single behavior. When user send a create account request with username and password, our service account will create a user ID and all of these data will record into the DB. After that, service account will send a create account response to the user with user ID. Let's get starting to the development. If you want to know details about creating multi-modular Spring Boot applications, you can watch my Spring Boot multi-microservice project from scratch without initializer video. You can reach this video using cards at the top of the screen. Today, we are starting to do development, adding two dependencies. We will use H2 database and Spring Boot starter data JPA dependencies in this project. To avoid complexity, we will use H2 in-memory DB. Click the sync icon. Now we are creating two packages which refers to our layers. Application, domain, and persistence. Application layer is our topmost layer and also deriving layer, so that we continue our development at this layer. I am adding two packages into the application layer, API and DTO. Remember our service account behavior. A user will send a create account request into the service account and expect a create account response from our service. To realize this, we need a two object, create account request with username and password, and other object create account response with user ID. Now we need to develop our REST controller. Account controller. This class will be REST controller. To do this, we add REST controller annotation above the class declaration. And we need to define an endpoint. To do this, we need to add request mapping annotation with endpoints. In this class, we will process post request from the user. When we take a create account request, we need to transform username and password data into the domain layer. To do this, we need an object to transport data between application and domain layer. To do this, I am creating a create account command object into the application layer. This object should contain three fields: private UID, user ID, private string username, and private string password. Now we are ready to pass data from application layer to the domain layer. We need an interface to provide communication between application layer and domain layer. I am creating a new interface into the command package. Account service. This interface will realize our save behavior. Go to the account controller and inject this interface. We are using constructor injection. Now we need to create a create account command and set its fields. We have a command object, and now we need to send this object into the domain layer. After this process, we will expect an answer from the domain layer. Now we need to send a user ID into the answer using create account response. This is a creating behavior, so we need to return our response with created status. At this point, our application layer development finished. We will continue our development into the domain layer. We need to create an Java object to implement account service interface. Account service impl. This class will implement account service. At this point, our domain layer behavior will be creating an user ID. Now we need to set this user ID into the command object. Now we need to record this data into the H2 database. To do this, we need to make a communication with persistence layer. We need to send our command object into the persistence layer. At this point, we need a new interface to make communication between domain and persistence layer. I am creating a new interface into the domain package. Account persist helper. This interface will have a record behavior, and this record will take a create account command object, and this method will return a create account command. Now go back to the account service impl class. We need to inject account persist helper into this account service impl class. We will use constructor injection method. Now we are ready to send our create account command object into the persistence layer, and we will return its response into the application layer. And finally, we need to add service annotation above the class declaration. Our domain layer development finished at this point. We will continue our development into the persistence layer. To save data into the DB, we need an entity object and a repository. We have account entity and account repository. Now we need to realize our persistence layer behavior. I'm creating a new Java class to implement account persist helper. This class will have a component annotation and we need to implement methods. Now we need to account repository injection. We will use constructor injection method. This record method will map command object to the account entity object and save this entity using account repository. After this process, this method will return command object. Yes, we finished our development. We need to test our codes. Before running our application, I would like to make Maven build. Maven clean install. Yes, our build success. Now go to the main class and click the run button. We have an error. At the account entity, we should check this class. Yes, we need to add entity and table annotation above the class declaration. Now go to the main class and click the run button. Yes, we have a successful application on the 8080 port. To check our save behavior, we will use Postman. We should send a post request into the 8080 API v1 accounts endpoint with username and password. Yes, our application is running successfully. We used account service interface into the application layer to communicate domain layer. And we used account persist helper interface to communicate with persistence layer. Our interface and their implementation is very important to determine our application shape. For example, if I put account service interface into the domain layer, this simple action will totally change our shape of codes. When our account service interface into the application layer, we have this kind of structure. Account service into the application layer and its implementation in the domain layer make this structure. But when we put the account service into the domain layer, it changed the shape of codes. To determine our architecture, interfaces and their implementation has a big role. When you make an architectural design, don't forget to use interfaces and their implementation in the true place, in the true package. As a software developers, these concepts are our main goals. Thanks for watching this video and don't forget to subscribe to Tanhu Labs channel. See you in the next video. Goodbye.